Hello and welcome to the PolyInnovator Omnicontent. So just to do a quick recap, considering the fact that it's been a while since the last Omnicontent went out, Omnicontent just stands for omnichannel, which for many of those who aren't aware of marketing terms just means that it's everywhere at once, which for a polymath, that's actually kind of perfect. So what I wanted to do with this is be able to explain my ideas and all the content in different mediums and platforms that everyone will use. So some people are very auditory, they want to listen to a podcast, they may want to watch, so I make it into a tele-innovator, which is what you're watching right now, or listening in if you're that particular person, but as well as maybe read. So I create the blog post first, because that's what I know well. I grew up as a teenager blogging, and that evolved into the PolyInnovator blog today, as well as the slideshow that we're going to view as well. So whenever you are watching this, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about in addition to the actual blog post that you can read.
Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator.
So kind of going into this, what is a polymath? So recently, the reason why I've actually put off the Omnicontent for so long is because of all of the Polycast interviews that I've been doing with people. So we've been having these amazing discussions where I've been able to talk to a wide range of people, entrepreneurs, CEOs, creatives, well-being consultants, all these different kinds of speakers and coaches and brilliant minds that I could pick at for your benefit, mine, and even theirs as well. I really try to make it full circle for everybody. And one of the questions that I ask to everybody is, what is a polymath to you? Specifically directed to that person. And some of the responses I got were fantastic. I wanted to put those in here, but I really think that deserves its own piece on its own, perhaps at the end of the Polymath Polycast season, which we're about a third of the way through done now. I'll make a culmination post of all the people together and really see how that goes. So going into this Omnicontent slideshow, why should you care? And I did not realize that my camera was going to cover up this particular setting, so I'm going to try to see if I can change that on the... Okay, well, I am sorry then. Essentially, you should care because polymaths are a super important concept for people to understand. In the Renaissance time, they were the people like Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and various other people of great renown during that period. The reason why it was a renaissance, because of all this brilliant new ideas and open minds and growth mindsets that everyone employed. People were much more open to alternative ideas or even conflicting ideas because of this particular ecosystem of people that were cultivated to this new way of thinking. Now, for the Dark Ages, they actually prevented a lot of people from actually becoming well known for their ideas, and if it was against the religious beliefs, they definitely stifled that growth. But this Renaissance was a very beautiful time, and there's a lot of scientists, I'm not just saying me, but a lot of people who are way smarter than me, who are saying that we're actually going to be hitting this apex, this dichotomy of two different paths that we can fight or work towards. One could be towards a prosperous path, a catalyst to humanity's great expansion, or the other one could be towards extinction. We're actually going to probably hit a recession due to this economic downturn on a global scale, not just the US, because of the coronavirus. And I think that's actually probably a good thing. There's a lot of growth that could happen during that time, but obviously it's not good because it's a downturn. So there's this dichotomy behind it. And going back to the point is that I think that if we have more interdisciplinary people, or businesses particularly in this case, we could have a much more prosperous growth, or even hyper growth in some cases, because of this concept. Really hope that the window does not cover it up so much. So, Jackofalltrades do something more. The reason why I have this line by itself is that a lot of people confuse polymath with a jack of all trades or a generalist, but really it comes down to a scale. A jack of all trades is that kind of blue collar guy that you might think of who is a plumber, electrician, and car mechanic. Granted, no one's always all of those things, but there was these people in these small towns who someone needed to do those jobs, and oftentimes they found the more techie based people, the ones who were like, hey, I know how all this plumbing works, all the electricity works in the building, I can do all that for you. There's actually a person in my town who I'll give a shout out. His name is Odd Job J. That's his business name, where he'll do any of those particular jobs for you. At least that's to my knowledge what his skills are. And it's interesting just how people had to be polymathic without even realizing it because of this jack of all trades need. They needed people to be of that dynamic sort. But a jack of all trades, I feel, is bottom tier. Not in a bad way, it's just basic level. I actually really respect jack of all trades, and that's who I was when I started doing my first employment over the past 10 years or so. So something more. What is that something more? Well, in reality, it comes down to mastery. What skills do you know? What particular things do you have to offer the world? As Emily Kuhn, in my interview today that we recorded, was talking about. She's someone that's very service-based and trying to provide a service or value to someone else. Usually skills are either for yourself or for someone else. You want to master these skills in order to progress in whatever field or goals you're working towards. So too much. If you're having too much of a mastery with so many skills and knowledge, it will be overwhelming, either for you or someone else, where you might not be able to break it down well enough if you're not able to communicate it. And so there's this YouTube channel, or at least show, where they get these experts who are explaining a concept like quantum physics or microeconomics, and just these grand macro ideas, or even very specific, specialized in a way, to various ages and the backgrounds. So for example, a 5th grader, a high schooler, someone who's just going into college but maybe going into that field, and then someone who's actually a PhD or master level in that field. And even though they're at the master level, there's so much more that they can learn from this master of this particular field. And so being able to distill all the knowledge you have, whether you're a specialist or polymath, into one particular thing is hard to focus. A lot of specialists have this issue too, because they're so focused into that, which leads into too little. What is a polymath to someone who's not focused enough in one area? Specialists are often found to be way too niche, and they actually can't actually innovate because they don't have the generalist mentality. They don't have the width of knowledge, solely the depth. So between the too much and too little, when it comes down to this T-chart, upside down T-chart, you have the width of the knowledge as well as the depth. You want to be able to have as much depth as possible so that you're actually making a educated opinion or service. But you also need to have width, because there might be a way that, like, hey, I may know a whole bunch about coding, but if I don't have a way to communicate that with my boss or client or whoever is giving me income for this particular skill, then you're not going to have the ability to actually use it in the way that you need to. So really it comes down to the Goldilocks zone, the just right particular thought, where it's an ideal balance between width and depth. Now, when it comes to polymathy, it may actually be a little bit more complicated than that, but I wanted to make this apply to you, whereas this particular slide does not necessarily explain it as well as I had hoped it would. But you want to find that just right balance between a generalist mindset, where you have a width of knowledge, as well as combined with the specialist mindset, that depth of knowledge. Not necessarily into just one particular pillar, but multiple if that's your particular interest. Going into the next slide here, I'm going this all in one take, so if you see any mistakes, I apologize. I really want to get that flow of ideas, and I don't want to do multiple clips that are going to have a issue. Like, a lot of the times when I've done the multiple clips, the editing, the actual output may seem more professional, but the information may be skewed. So going back to that width of knowledge, you're distributing your attention towards different knowledge pools. Now, this goes into the skill tree concept that we talked about in the last Omnicontent, but when you're focused on a goal, it's not about the skills that are going to get there. It's about what kind of things you can do to learn the skills or progress towards that goal, depending on if it's learning or application of knowledge. And when it comes to that skill, you may or may not have credentials to do it. Think about your hobbies that you do. For me, it's pixel art with 2D characters called spriting, where basically I sit there and make my own Mario sprites or Pokemon sprites or whatever. It's just a hobby I've cultivated over the years that I was recently on a podcast for, actually. Time for Your Hobby. The host was Alex. He's really cool. And it's not something that I'm going to build an income off of. I don't really want to. Even for PolyInnovator, where I want to share as much of my knowledge as possible, I have not talked about it at all to anybody. But it is part of PolyInnovator in a way, because it's a part of me. And that's kind of the same thing. So I don't have credentials for spriting. That's the point. But it's still something that I could do, and I distribute my attention to. The other thing is, someone who's distributing their attention, people are going to be part of that attention span too. Whether it's your friend, your family, or your professional network, which could be part of that particular friend and family. Maybe your boss is your dad. It doesn't matter. But you're building that network of people, a mastermind of sorts, of people who you can rely on. one thing I'm really hoping about from the Polymath Polycast, from all these interviews, is that I can build this network of really awesome individuals that not only can the listener like you can learn from, but as well as me personally, I can make these strong connections and have these awesome conversations with these like-minded and even perhaps even opposite-minded individuals to help both of us grow. Now, some of this is cut off because of the video here. I wonder if I can turn off the webcam. No, I can't. Which, perhaps, like, this skill of recording this podcast, Polycast, in this format, using this tool, Bandicam, is adequate enough to do its task. For example, my skill of knowing where this window is, that you can see here, this whole window right here, I didn't know if you could move it during the actual recording or not. My skill was not at a competent level to produce this particular content adequately. And so that's one thing about distributing your attention is how much attention do you need to apply towards learning that skill or approaching that goal versus can I use it for something else? And then on top of that, this is kind of more of a sub-niche topic, but despite personality or genius, you need to be able to communicate with others. A lot of great minds, such as Alan Turing or even Leonardo da Vinci, who was very gregarious, there's a lot of communication errors that a lot of these great people have made. Steve Jobs was known to be kind of an asshole, but he was able to communicate his vision in such a way that has captivated people ever since he even passed. And so being able to communicate whatever idea, skill, or goal that you're reaching towards is very important. For me, for example, my goal is to create PolyInnovator into a wide-ranging content ecosystem. So where no matter where you are, you'll be able to find me and this brand in some shape or form. I encourage you to go to the most obscure social platform and look for PolyInnovator. I'm sure you'll find me. I may not have any content, but I'll be on there. Alright, so here we get some of the meat of the video here. Specialist or polymath? Which path should you choose? One of the recent interviews I uploaded was with Eric Wallace, someone who is another polymath like myself, or at least I'm trying to be, and we're both polymathic and becoming polymaths. And one thing he said that I'm laughing, but it's kind of harsh, but it's very true in a way, is that specialism or niching down so much is for insects. That's what ants and a lot of insects do in order to achieve a greater whole. So an ant will be a worker or the queen and that kind of thing. And these workers will have different jobs as well. They'll be defense, they'll be retrieval, scouts, whatever. And although humans are way more complicated than ants, obviously, the same concept can be applied to specialism. We are much more multi-potential than people realize. Multi-potentialite is a term for people with wide-ranging potential in different areas. That's a very simplistic, I might need to make another video on this, but that's a very simplistic explanation of it. And every human individual has the capacity, let me repeat that, every human has the capacity to do anything they want and everything they want. There is a very cultural norm that you have to go get a job, get a degree, get a special skill, a hard income skill, that will be your only skill for life. That's just kind of how people view getting an education or working in a career. They think that if they make a decision at 17, 21, that it's going to lead the rest of their life. The truth is, most people don't stick to one thing. There is a handful of people throughout all the hundreds of years that the U.S. has been alive. I don't know about other countries as much. I would like to know more. But I'm sure that they're very similar in nature as well, like in Japan, where some people may work the same job for 40 years. But for the most part, people switch careers, people pivot, people change what they're doing in that particular employer or career. They may start out as a low entry-level worker, but then they work their way up to management. That is a completely different skill, a completely different specialty to know. That's why a lot of entrepreneurs have a lot of trouble, because they go in there with the excitement of creating and innovating and trying to do a lot of new things. And then they start growing and they realize, oh, I'm just doing operations and management, which is not a bad thing. It means they're succeeding, but it's a dissonance of where they wanted to be and where they are. That's why a lot of entrepreneurs sell their companies to other people so they can go and build a new one. It's that thrill of the chase. Specialist versus polymath. When you're a specialist, it doesn't mean a bad thing. I'm not trying to say it's a bad thing to be a specialist. There's going to be a need for it for a long time. Even with the rise of AI and technology, There's always going to be someone who needs to be the repairer of the car manufacturer of robots. So a lot of people are like saying, oh, these machines are taking our jobs, but who repairs the machines? At the moment, not many machines can repair other machines. There's going to be the person that needs to run and operate the machines. There's actually a shortage of auto mechanics who can work in Tesla factories and even like solar cities factories, because they need someone who can actually have the mechanical mind, but for the specificity of like programming a particular arm. They may need to fix an issue, like a glitch happened to damage a machine arm. So they need someone who's mechanically inclined to actually fix it and identify the problem, but then also be able to program it new. So there's actually like a much more new world that's coming around us. And so we need specialists, but there's also, like I said, a new world ahead of us that we need polymaths as well. We need the people who can be divergent, which even that example I shared was someone with two skills, being two different specialties. There we go. That mechanic that we talked about, he has two specialties, he or she, or it doesn't matter what particular, yeah. But a polymath is someone who's a master of multiple areas, that divergent ideas that can be able to incorporate everything into that one new idea, that one new goal and application of all those multiple ideas. I hope that's conveying well enough. There's a typo. Yes, innovatio. What is a polymath to me? So this is my personal brand. I'm going to talk about myself just a little bit. Polymathy is a term that I adopted for PolyInnovator because of where I wanted to take my life. First and foremost, I've always had that creative mind, and I wanted to be able to innovate very new ideas. And let's just start off by saying, when I was a teenager, like 16 or 17, I would tell people that I want to be CEO of an international company driven to innovate technology and ideology. I had that line down, and that's what I would say. That was coming out of a 17-year-old's mouth. And so it's one of those things where I knew where I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to be into innovation, but how did I want to do it? How did I want to build that career? And so everyone would think, oh, you should go to college, get a degree. And I tried that. Didn't work for me. And it's one of those things where I found that for my career, I wanted to do many different areas. I wanted to culminate every single pool of knowledge that I wanted to work towards. Music, creativity, polymathy, like this actual topic that I want to learn more about. And that's why I created the podcast too, is to learn from other people and get their ideas. And all these different interests I wanted to be able to pursue without the issue of having to get a degree for every single one. Now, I might end up doing that down the line. I might get a PhD, I might get a master's. It doesn't matter what I work towards, as long as I have the platform to do it, which is why I created PolyInnovator, or Polymath of Innovation, to do so. As well as I wanted to be able to express my creative side and create a portfolio of knowledge, such as this video here, to expand not only people's ideas and minds, but also to be able to express what I want to talk about. Finally, it comes down to my hero, who Leonardo da Vinci is someone who you might actually think about when you think of a polymath. The first person that comes to mind, even the first image that comes to mind, is the Vitruvian Man, the person who is sitting there of the ideal male human specimen, where Leonardo da Vinci is known for. He wasn't the only one that drew it, but he was the one that's known for it because of the immense detail and application of science into that artistic piece. He is the epitome that we can think of the balance between science and artistic values. And so he actually created most of his arts, such as the Mona Lisa or even the Last Supper, advanced mathematics and creativity through science, that he was able to actually get extremely precise lines and details into the anatomy of the Vitruvian Man, or the depth of field, so to speak, the depth of field for the Last Supper. If you look at the Last Supper, you can actually see the architectural values of the lines and how precise they are. And when you are in that field, you're able to actually see the mathematics behind it. And it's very interesting how he was able to bring the dichotomy of both of those areas into one creative outlet, let alone innovative. And so that's what I want to do in a more modern era, be a modern polymath, or in my definition, a polyinnovator, because innovation is the new norm for most people, even not just in technology or science, but also in creativity and ideology. That is what a polymath means to me. So this is just kind of a little promotion there. You can follow me on most social channels. Like I said earlier, I encourage you to find like obscure ones such as like DTube or Steemit, and you'll be able to find me. All of them use PolyInnovator. Here's another thing here. The Omnicontent, like I said, is for anyone. I want to be able to make it as wide-reaching and repurposed as possible for the sake of each little person that's going to be listening to me. So if you want to read, here's the blog post. That's where I'm going to try to culminate all the areas together. I haven't figured out a way to embed the slideshows in an adequate manner just yet. I don't want to just put it in the middle of the blog post. But the video and the polycast are actually automatically embedded now. So as long as I add the link to it, it'll be right there in the same spot for each post. Now, if you want to watch this video, it'll be on YouTube, Facebook Watch, DTube, as well as perhaps either a clip or the whole thing on IGTV down the line. So it's really everywhere where you can watch it. If you want to listen to the podcast, you can listen to it on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, all these different podcast platforms. If you want to read it, it'll be on the Omniblog on my website, polyinnovator.space, as well as on Hive, formerly Steemit. They're both kind of the same thing. That's a whole other story, but they're on both of them. It's automatically posted to there. And then finally, thank you. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for listening to me rant and drone on and on about polymaths, because I know many people are going to be like, I don't really care. But then there's going to be the people who are curious about it. Like, what is a polymath? And there's not really any content out there for the specific niche. No one talks about polymaths, and it's one of those things, like I said, that I really think needs to be talked about. We need more polymaths in the world. We need to be able to create these new innovations and overall produce a new positive outcome for the world. So thank you for making it through all this with me today, and I appreciate you. Have a good day.
Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator.